So we saw that when Hashem takes us back, it's in a different state. It's a different type of relationship.
But you said no conditions, so
There's no conditions anymore.
It should be how it was before.
What?
If there's no conditions, then it should be like it was before.
Meaning?
It take you back unconditionally.
No, but unconditionally in the sense that you suddenly understand that you're here to be the husband. You're not here to make conditions. It's a relationship that's based on what we are, not on what we'll give.
Okay.
It's much deeper. ואף על פי שעל ידי המצוות ממשיכים רצון העליון. So what does he mean here? That even though you continue by doing mitzvos to bring down the higher will, what he means is that Hashem's will is performed because you do the mitzvah, even though there's no conditions. He has to say this because otherwise, what does it mean that it changed? If I tell you do this and this, but I don't expect you to do it, so is it really still my will? So it says, yes, this is called higher will. Higher will is unconditional. Higher will means that from our point of view, higher will we've talked about many times means that I'm always consistently, naturally doing God's will. But if it's natural and it's coming from above, would you call that doing His will? Why is that not just robotic?
Because you have still a free choice. So you could stop doing it.
You could, but you have no effort in doing it. It's like the strength for it is coming from above. The want to do it is coming from above. So why would you call it free will?
Because when a father takes his child's hand, the child goes with the father. There's different ways. Either the father can drag him along because he's sitting on the pavement screaming and shouting when he gets there, or he's walking with his father, like a mensch.
Right.
Or he can let go of his father's hand and run away.
And
so even though Hashem's hand is out, even though Hashem is pulling you, you can still break away from that. That's your free will.
Okay, that it's maybe possible, but how can you break away from his grasp? It's very difficult. Can, but you already have this innate need to do it. It's like that will has become part of you. It's effortless in a certain sense. So why would you call that performing God's will? So you can't. It's very hard to call it perform. But he says no. But this is the higher will. The higher will is almost, I thought you were going to say, when your son grows up and now he does things because he wants to. It's his will already.
Yeah, but he still does what you want.
But it's still what you taught him to do. You don't care. The need really is not that he follow what I say. That's not. It's really that he ingrained that knowledge. He became the person that I was hoping he would become. So in that sense, if I've given him the will and it's become his and it's just how he is now, I'm just as happy. I'm not. I have no. So that's from my point of view. From his point of view, he doesn't see it necessarily as my will, but he realizes that we're now aligned, that we want the same things. So he understands at some level that he's causing pleasure for me for doing what his father tells him. And is it unconditional? Yeah, it can be unconditional. There's no problem. You could still say, look, even if you don't follow my will, what I taught you, I still love you, I still care for you, I'm still going to give you. I would prefer that as an adult, you yourself would adopt the right way of life. That's, of course, something that I prefer. But even if you don't, it's unconditional now. So he says, by doing the mitzvahs, you still bring down the higher will, meaning that the father still feels that his will is being done. אך כדי להיות הגילוי ממש למטה, עצמיות בחינה זו דסליק לעילה לעילה, הוא על ידי תשובה דווקא דכתיב ממעמקים קראתיך. And now he says, but remember we said that when God destroyed the temple, he secluded himself, as it were. So there was a bad situation. The son didn't just come to this understanding. It was chalak, it was a glat. It just went easily from being an adolescent to being an adult. It was a time of rebellion. So he says for that there's still tshuva. What does it mean? That in a certain sense the father is still reserved because he remembers the rebellion. He's reserved not in the sense that he won't give, he's going to give. But he's afraid in a certain sense that this might repeat.
Holding back from giving his full self.
No, he's giving himself fully, but he's holding back because he's afraid. He's giving everything unconditionally, but he himself is reserved. He says, I don't want to commit my entire interest into this child, because what if he does this again? So he says, tshuva is the answer to that. That if every day when you wake up, even though you're doing everything right, and you come and you say to your father, I know that you're a little reserved because you're afraid of my possible actions. I want you to understand that from day to day I become more attached to you. I haven't done anything wrong, but I know that your reservation is caused by whatever happened in the past, and so I'm aware of that, and I tell you that every day I'm more attached to you, and more attached to Hashem. That's called Kol Yamav B'Tshuva. That's what he calls in the Tanya all his days in Tshuva, even though he hasn't done anything wrong. But he realizes there is a certain reservation on the part of Hashem. Hashem is not revealing himself fully. And he would say that even though the will is, I think that the difference would be, I see that he says it here, but I think the difference is very simple, that by doing mitzvot you bring down the higher will. That's happening. When you do tshuva, the undoing of the reservation appears in the sense of Torah in your heart. That you begin to understand Hashem better. You understand the world better. The Torah in you is richer. You begin to understand things. That's the sign that you did tshuva. Okay? He doesn't say it here, but I think that it's written in different places. וגם שעל ידי התשובה הוא תשוב היטתה מנפילתה לעלות למעלה, וזהו שהתשובה הוא עניין החזרת פנים בפנים. He also says that the lower hay, right, which we talk about in Igeras HaTshuva, the lower hay is also what I damaged in the past when I didn't do Hashem's will. So the lower hay, that also needs to return up. It needs to go back to its source. And that happens, again, what does it mean? It means that when I was distant from Hashem because I was thrown out of the house, I was in exile, the world was in a bad state. And teshuv hei tata'ah, teshuv hei la'ah is that the world goes back to its normal state. Teshuv hei tata'ah means that kingdom returns to where it was. That's exactly what he's saying here, that my inner sense of God returns back to where it was. And that, he says, that's called panim b'panim. That's what they had during the time of the temple. And we said that was what was lacking, that I see more clearly what life is about. That's teshuv hei tatah. וזהו שכתוב גבי קריאת שמע, זאת המצווה, לעשות בארץ שמע ישראל, ומבואר לאל הקושייה, דעה קריאת שמע חובת הגופי. Right? So what's he talking about here? That Shema Yisrael is not.
Why can you only do say Shema Yisrael?
No, it's not. It's the psukim before Shema Yisrael. How does it say? It says, וזאת המצווה, החוקים והמשפטים אשר ציווה השם אלוקיכם, ללמד אתכם לעשות בארץ, אשר אתם עוברים שמה לרשתה. למען תירא את השם אלוקיך, לשמור את כל מצוותיו, חוקיו ומצוותיו, אשר אנוכי מצווך, אתה ובנך ובן בנך כל ימי חייך, למען יארכון ימיך. ושמעת ישראל ושמרת לעשות אשר ייטב לך, ואשר תרבון מאוד, כאשר דיבר השם אלוקי אבותיך לך ארץ זבת חלב ודבש, שמע ישראל השם אלוקינו, Hashem Echad. So what is he saying? He's saying the parsha starts. It's the parsha. It's actually not the parsha. It's actually Shema Yisrael is a separate parsha. But the way he explains it, I guess, is in the Gemara, it's this way, that when Moshe Rabbeinu said Shema Yisrael, it was part of his commandments to us when we came into the land of Israel. It's as if this wasn't a commandment in the Midbar. He also didn't reveal it until the very end.
A renewed commandment.
What? We didn't know about this
They
commandment.
renewed. We didn't know about it at all.
We didn't know about it. He didn't say it. He only said it before he passed away. So we didn't know it. And he's saying that ללמד אתכם לעשות בארץ. That Shema is something that you do in the land. What does it mean? So from this they learned that it's chovat haguf. It's sort of like putting tefillin on.
So you didn't have to say Krishma if you didn't. What's that?
No, you do.
No, I'm saying.
Because once it was given, so it's become chovat haguf. It's like tefillin, right? Maasros you don't have to because it's not chovat haguf. You don't have to give a tithe because your body needs it. It's not you yourself that needs it. It's the fruit that needs it. The fruit needs to be maaser. But Shema is the duty of you yourself. You're obliged. You're your body, as it were. You yourself. And yourself is obliged. So wherever you are, whether you're in Eretz Yisrael or you're not, you have to say it. But the fact that he connected it to when you're in the land, from that it was learned that it's chovat haguf, meaning that you have to do it wherever you are. Okay, but if it's chovat haguf, now he says there's a kushya which we really would need to look at dibur matchil ve'yadat hayom. They say here that if it's chovat haguf, so why is it Shema? Because Shema means to understand. And that's like a spiritual thing. You don't say about Ava and Yira that it's Chovat HaGuf. It's not Chovat HaGuf. Avat Hashem, Yirat Hashem is not an obligation of the self, in the sense that it's connected somehow to the body. It's Chovat HaLvavot. It's what we call the psychological demands. It's not physical. It says, well, how do you say this about Shema? You have to see the exact question that he asked there, but I think that's what he asks. So he says, מכל מקום אין מקרא יוצא מידי פשוטו, דהיינו שקיום המצוות בארץ, ובפרט בזמן שבית המקדש קיים, הוא בחינה עליונה יותר מקיום המצוות עתה, והיינו משום שיש כמה בחינות ומדרגות בעניין המשכה שנמשך על ידי המצוות. So he says that really you can't say that I don't want to say it wrong. I have to look at the other mimer again. I don't remember how we built it there. So I think we'll skip it for now. I'll look at it and tomorrow we'll go back to it. Okay. So now page 31, right? So we're still in this note from the Tzemach Tzedek. ועוד זאת, שהמצוות נקראו לבושים וגם נקראו פירות, כמאמר הז"ל. Again, this is a long discussion of how the mitzvahs will be different in the different time frames. They were different in the time of the Avos. They were different in the time of the patriarchs. They were different when the temple stood. And they'll be different when the exile ends. Okay, 31.
We just have one minor problem.
What? You don't have 31? What?
We had not 8:31. It's not here.
It is. Almost certainly.
30, 29, 32. 31.
There you go.
I didn't get one of that. Okay.
And what's more, שהמצוות נקראו לבושים. All the mitzvahs are garments, as we know. This is famous. That we wear all the mitzvahs. They don't become internalized. Okay? Because it's like a levush. It's like my body is now doing this. But a mitzvah is not like I understand so and so. There's no mitzvah of understanding. The only mitzvah where there is to understand, maybe that's the question he's asking about Shema also, The only mitzvah that's to understand is Torah. So Torah is both a levush and an inner light. It also changes how you think. And Torah, in that sense, is a unique mitzvah. And so we've talked a lot about that in the 4th and 5th chapter of Tanya. Explains it. וגם נקראו פירות, כמאמר הז"ל, מהי פרי מצוות. But they're also called the fruit of your labors. That's what the sages call them in the Talmud. והיינו שעל שם היות על ידן המשכת רצון העליון, שהוא אור מקיף, סובב כל המין, נקראים לבושים. What does it mean? That they're the product? Because they bring down what we call the surrounding light, and that's what it means to have a levush, right? The levush comes from the levush, a garment, is of the same nature as the light of God that it brings down. Since the light of God that it's bringing down is the surrounding light, for that reason, it itself is also a garment, which surrounds the person, as it were. סובב כל המין, נקראים לבושים, ועל שם בחינת האור וההמשכה, נמשך על ידם מסובב כל המין, וממלא כל המין, בחינת האור פנימי, נקראו פרי. But the fact that they're called fruit, and fruit you eat, so they have a different aspect. They have also an inner aspect. He's saying something incredible. He says, normally we don't think of mitzvos as, how would you say, sustaining the person's life. If it's a garment, it's external. And perot means that you receive the reward, that it sustains you in some way. It's internalized. It like a fruit that you're eating. So he says, yes, the mitzvot, הנמשך מסובב כל עמים בממלא כל עמים, מבחינת האור פנימי נקראו פרי. But you can't ignore the fact that what he's saying here is, you can't ignore the fact that even though the mitzvahs themselves, they're surrounding light, they're like a garment, but this garment is coming down into a human being who's here. And so there's no such thing as not receiving anything from the mitzvah. Even though you don't receive the reward until the world to come, you do receive some pleasure from it. And that's the whole question of whether mitzvot lehenot nitnu or lo lehenot nitnu. Were the mitzvos given to give you pleasure or not? The halacha is that no. But doesn't mean that they don't. Meaning, the halacha is, if you didn't receive pleasure from it, doesn't mean that you didn't do the mitzvah. If I'd put on tefillin, I didn't receive anything from it. I just wore the tefillin.
Yeah, but you missed the kavanah.
Why? No, the kavanah is just that I want to put tefillin on. I didn't receive anything from it. Hana'ah is something different. But a lot of times you do receive hana'ah from it. That's called the perot. And in the future, it will all be perot. They will all become something that you eat from. All the mitzvahs that you did. That's what it means, hayom la'asotam, u'machar lekabel scharam. That you receive something from it. So it changes you in some way. So he says that too is a different aspect that will be more revealed in the future. Meaning normally now, in the time of the exile, the mitzvahs are just a garment. It's just something you wear, but you don't receive any pleasure from. Or you normally don't receive pleasure from.
You do it, it's cold, they're keeping you warm.
What garment keeps you warm?
Cold.
Huh?
In winter.
Yeah, but I'm talking about a mitzvah.
I'm saying the mitzvahs,
So which mitzvah gives you warmth?
Speaking spiritually.
I understand. No, so what does it give you?
All mitzvahs, they keep you safe and sound from the world outside. Guard you and protect you.
But they don't.
To death.
But they don't. That's what it means, that surrounding light.
But it still has some hashpa'ah.
So he's saying, if there's some hashpa'ah, it can't be that, if it's a garment, so like you said, a garment protects you from the outside. That's protection. That's something else. But you're not aware of it. If you become aware of it, if you begin to see why it is that the fact that I did a certain mitzvah, it caused me pleasure in some way. I received the pleasure, I understand the pleasure. That's perot. That's when the mitzvah becomes fruit. It becomes internalized in some way. וזהו בצילו חימדתי וישבתי ופריו מתוק לחיקי. And that's what it means that I sat in his shadow, in his shade. Talking about his tree, as it were. So the tree gave me shade. That's the external aspect of the mitzvah. But it also says that the rest of the verse in Song of Songs, "Upirioch matok lechiki," but I also, his fruit was sweet to my taste. So all of that comes from because of tshuva. That's what it means, panim v'panim. Again, this is just another explanation of what it means, why tshuva is required. Remember, because that's what the Alter Rebbe said, that in spite of the fact that you need to do mitzvos, there's also tshuva suddenly. Why suddenly you say tshuva? Because he says tshuva is, the second answer here is that it internalizes the mitzvah. The first answer was that the tshuva brings Hashem closer to you because he was secluded because of the exile. And that was the first thing we said. The second answer is that it makes the mitzvah not just a surrounding light, it transforms it into an inner light, into one that you can experience. So that's the addition.